Now, South Ossetia still has a long way to go to become a viable independent state. Well, to talk more on this, let's cross live to Donald Rayfield, Professor of Georgian and Russian Studies at the University of London, a keen observer of the situation in the region. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Now, Russia has been a staunch supporter of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. So how likely is it, do you think, that the republics will win further international recognition?
I think at the moment it's very unlikely. If you look at North Cyprus has been a pariah state recognised only by Turkey since 1974. And there's very little sign of any progress. And although there are celebrations in Abkhazia and South Ossetia, I think there are at least three very good reasons to be worried. For one thing, Abkhazia is going to be either a pariah state like North Cyprus, or it is going to be gradually absorbed into the Russian Federation, which has, of course, enormous economic interests there. The land, the villas, hotels are bought up by Russian interests. There is also the problem of some probably 200,000 former Georgian-speaking or Mingrelia-speaking residents of Abkhazia, many of whom have relatives still there in the south, who are not Abkhaz and who don't sympathize and are not celebrating today. They now lose all hope of returning home. And I think the third and perhaps most worrying thing is that many in the international community will not see Russia as a protector of small nations, but will be afraid that Russia is trying slowly, bit by bit, to reconstitute the old Soviet Union. And there is one really good thing about this, and I think that it will put an end to the lack of realism among Georgian politicians. They will no longer make promises that they cannot possibly keep of recovering lost territory. They might well get on and try and make a decent society and a decent economy out of their own country. That's the good thing.
Also, looking back now to those tragic events of last August, do you think that there was actually another way of doing things? If Russia hadn't gone in and we now weren't in a position where South Ossetia and Abkhazia were proclaiming their independence, what else could have happened at that point?
It was a chain reaction of people behaving badly. There was a lot of provocation of the Georgians by the local South Ossetian militias, and Saakashvili did something very stupid and very wicked in attacking Tskhinvali. Russia, I suppose, had to respond to that, but the way it responded, allowing a lot of irregular Chechens and Ossetian troops to go in and devastate villages, kill and burn, I think was devastating for its image. There was another way, but it had to be started much earlier, of much stronger international pressure on Georgia and on the Abkhaz and South Ossetian separatists to come to some sort of agreement in which these two nations would enjoy genuine autonomy. And I think the eventual solution, which is very, very difficult to see coming about, would be for the international community to promise Abkhazia, which is a viable country, recognition if it demilitarizes, if there are no Russian troops there, and it accepts guarantees of security from the international community. Then there's a hope that eventually, with decades passing, these wars will be forgotten and Abkhazia and Georgia could live together as separate countries with an open border. But that's the only possible solution to the problem, and I'm afraid it's not a very likely one.
Professor Rayfield, we recently heard from President Medvedev reiterating his support for the decision taken by Russia in August to act militarily. So Russia does still fully stand behind its actions. But clearly international views do vary. But we are at this current juncture in time with these two republics having proclaimed their independence. Are you of the viewpoint that they have no right to declare this, that it was simply something that they should never have done?
They had the right to separate when they felt oppressed, and in fact the Georgians did behave pretty badly 20 years ago and provoked this. The case of South Ossetia is particularly tragic because, as you probably know, Ossetians and Georgians live very happily together in villages all over Georgia, and for 800 years there's been no conflict between them. With Abkhazia, it is a more complex question. Abkhazia is really a viable country, but there should have been negotiations under pressure from the international community to ensure that there was a peaceful settlement, and any independence, any autonomy did not involve them coming under the protection of Russia to such an extent they have Russian passports, they enter the Russian pension system. So to an outsider it looks very much as if their independence is no greater than, say, the Isle of Man's independence from Great Britain.
OK, Donald Railfield, Professor of Russian and Georgian Studies at the University of London. Thank you very much for those thoughts.
Not at all. Thank you for inviting me.